focus to, or even the thoughts that are unconsciously spinning through us, as well as the actions we take, impact how we feel inside. Very simple. Our thoughts and our actions or behaviors are going to impact how we feel. Now, it also works in the opposite direction, where our feelings can impact the thoughts we think. So if we're depressed, for example, or if we're anxious, we might think certain thoughts that don't come in as frequently when we're feeling more joyful. Let's go to the next slide. So what is cognitive behavioral therapy, as we're discussing? If we move to the next slide, you'll see a diagram here which shows the circular way in which our thoughts influence our behaviors, and also our behaviors influence our thoughts. So, for example, if we rush around all the time, if we try to do too many things at once, we might be more likely to have anxious thoughts and anxious feelings. So thoughts, feelings, and behavior each impact one another. Let's go to the next slide. And one of my favorite quotes that's very much akin to cognitive behavioral therapy, this is from an unknown source, says there are only two things we can control in life: our actions and our attitudes. So today we're going to look at how we can make simple changes in our actions and simple changes in our attitudes or thoughts that we choose to focus on that help us to feel the way we want to feel. Next slide. Okay, here's just the cognitive behavioral therapy triad laid out in a different way. We can go to the next slide. So I invite you now, as you think about your feelings, and I asked you a moment ago, what's one way you'd like to feel today, or a quality you'd like to cultivate? Yeah. And I also want to invite you to think about now, what's a feeling you have at work related to time management or perhaps anxiety that is hard for you. So let's go to the next slide. So whatever feeling you might have that's hard for you, you want to take a moment to not just push it away right away, but to do what's called in the world of therapy a self-kindness practice. So for me, sometimes I can feel overwhelmed. If I've decided in my head I have to do more things than I really am capable of doing in one day, I can feel overwhelmed. So if you could write down what's a feeling that you tend to have that's challenging in your workday related to time management or any kind of anxious feeling. And let's just acknowledge that feeling, whatever it is for you. For me, it can be sometimes overwhelmed. And pause and take a deep breath. And place a hand on your belly, a hand on your heart. And as you breathe in, please say to yourself, and you can paraphrase this, say to yourself, I love you so much. I know it's hard right now. I'm with you. So go ahead and try that on your own now. You can use the words that are written here on this slide, or you can make up your own self-kindness statement where you're really speaking to yourself with the energy of self-love and self-kindness. I love you so much. I know it's hard right now. I'm with you. And then next, ask yourself, what would give me some relief? What would give me some relief? Good. For me, I'm just getting the message. Go sit in your garden during lunch. Let go of the to-do list. That would give me some relief. But see for yourself what your intuition tells you. What would give you some relief? And I invite you to share in the chat, what would give you some relief? from whatever challenging feeling you're feeling. Let's go to the next slide. One of my favorite quotes from Viktor Frankl: between the stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our power and freedom. Next slide. So here's where we get down to the nitty-gritty of applying cognitive behavioral therapy to the present moment, where we get to feel into that space that's between the stimulus and the response and choose what our response is. There's our freedom. So I invite you now to get out a piece of paper and draw a triangle on the piece of paper, or you could cut out a triangle if you have those scissors and what you need. Okay. Now, at the top of the triangle, I invite you to write whatever feeling is troubling you related to anxiety or time management. Okay. So for me, it's overwhelmed. I'm going to write, just drop my triangle. Overwhelmed. Now, so on the bottom left, whatever is your feeling that's troubling you, I invite you to brainstorm any thoughts or attitudes that make that troubling feeling, in my case, overwhelm, worse. So go ahead and do this for yourself. Like for me, what makes overwhelm worse is when I think thoughts like, I can't handle this, or when I start making negative predictions about what might happen, like it's not going to work out. So just be honest with yourself. What thoughts sometimes pass through that feed that difficult feeling for you? Here's my examples. Okay. And then on the other side of the triangle in the bottom right corner, I invite you now to write whatever behaviors or actions make that feeling worse. Like for me, sometimes when I'm overwhelmed, I can isolate myself. I can start thinking, oh, I have so much work to do. I have to do work, and not connect with my loved ones. So that would be an action by isolating myself. That makes it worse. But what makes it worse for you? Just really bringing in that self-love as you do this with the self-honesty. Okay, and then just notice what's in your triangle, what thoughts and what behaviors or attitudes and actions are words I like to use, make the hard feeling worse. Okay, we're just getting it out onto paper. And now let's shift. Thank you, everyone. And go to the next slide. Okay, so this is just sharing an example of what we did. Let's move to the next slide. So now we get to create empowering triangles or empowerment triangles. So we've acknowledged what makes our feelings worse inside or our inner state. Sometimes feelings coalesce into a kind of mood or even a character quality of like pessimism, or when we're anxious all the time, that can be like a character quality that we develop rather than just a feeling that moves, that comes and goes. But now let's think of how we want to feel. Like someone said, perseverance. So I invite you again to write at the top of your triangle a feeling or a quality you want to feel in your workday. So for me, one quality I want to feel is easeful. Okay. So write whatever is the quality or feeling for you. And now, as we did a moment ago, at the bottom of your triangle on on one side, please write those attitudes or thoughts that will help you feel the way you would like to feel. So what's coming in for me as a thought, very simple one, all is well. All is well. I hear the birds singing outside and all is well. Another thought that's coming through is take your time. Okay. So coming up with whatever thoughts or attitudes are helpful to feeding your feeling, write them down, and you can add to this list later. And finally, now come up with actions or behaviors that help you feel the way you want to feel. So what helps me feel easeful